Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight on the Will and Dave Show. Just a quick little heads up here, a little content advisory. We're going to be talking about free speech mostly tonight. We may get into some topics revolving around Nazis, Nazi control of Germany, the Gestapo, etc., and various human rights violations that may or may not have come along with that. So just be aware of that as we get into the show tonight.
Welcome to the Will and Dave Show.
Hey, Will.
Hey, Dave.
How's it going?
Oh, yeah, it's going. Another day in paradise. Or as
We
you would
have
say, always good.
always good. Yep. It could be a fun night tonight. We had to stop each
Yeah.
other before we got into it on the
We went
countdown.
off on a tangent before we even got into the show tonight. And it
And
was
then we had to
another episode.
then we had to extend the countdown to make up for stuff we forgot to do it while we were fighting.
That's our relationship in a microcosm, isn't it?
Man, oh man. What
So
a week.
What are we talking about tonight, Dave?
Oh gosh. Screaming pastors.
Or not screaming pastors?
Or not screaming pastors, yes.
Or not screaming pastors?
I spent a lot of time this week listening to preachers on YouTube in research for the show, Will, and I'd like to think I'm more spiritual for it, but I'm not convinced.
You're more something for it.
I'm out a lot of time.
Yeah.
I could have been watching Joe Rogan.
Oh, yes. Our Lord and Savior, Joe Rogan.
No, not our Lord and Savior, but a lot more fun than watching pastors. That much is true.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was my week. I'm missing my granddaughter because I'm a most awesome grandpa. And
I get to see her soon. Teehee.
Shut up over there.
You've already seen her. You got to spend weeks with her.
I did.
I didn't. So
Yeah. So that has been my week. It's been interesting. I'm almost on the road again with my car. I got my seat covers in, and I'm getting
Nice.
it all done so I can go back Uber and lifting for fun and money.
What a coincidence. I also spent a whole bunch of money fixing my car.
Oh, what was wrong with your car?
A whole bunch of small things that I wanted to have fixed before making the trip cross country.
Gotcha. So yeah, so that was my week. I didn't, it just was one of those things you do what you do when you got to do it.
It was productive, if not enjoyable.
I'd like to say, sure.
Yes. We keep telling ourselves that so we feel better about it.
That's right.
That's our silver lining.
Here's what I did do, though. I worked for this fine lady this week.
Hi, I'm Susan. I think that in all the world, there's nothing quite like the coziness of a handmade quilt. So I'm on a mission to spread that love as far and wide as I can. If you're a quilt maker, I offer long arm quilting services, and I accept work from anywhere in North America. If you already know how to make quilts and you want to learn how to machine quilt them yourself, I have a number of classes and lots of tutorials available that can help you with that. And if you don't want to do any of those processes, you just want to go straight to having the quilt with no delay, I do have a number of fully completed quilts available for sale as well. So details on all of those things can be found on my website, www.stitchedbysusan.com. Well, I've got to get back to quilting, so I'm going to let you get back to the Will and Dave Show. Enjoy.
Susan is our sponsor, our largest sponsor for obvious reasons. And I want to give her a shout out because she has a new podcast. And if you go to our website, thewillanddaveshow.com, we have a link there for her podcast, and it's absolutely amazing.
It is fantastic.
You will not regret listening to Susan and her guests. I don't know what else to say about it. It's really awesome.
Well, if you want to support us, though, I mean, supporting her is great, but if you'd like to support us on the screen, you can see it, or if you're listening, you can go to www.buymeacoffee.com/Will and Dave Show. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can give a one-time donation to help support the show, kind of grease the gears and keep us going.
Yes, they can. So I phoned Will earlier this week, and I said, what is with your Bill C-19?
C10.
C10, right. I'm sorry, C10.
Yep.
And your response was, what?
Yeah, I hadn't really heard of it.
And then you got to looking on social media and whatnot, and the interwebs are blowing up.
Yes.
with this newest iteration of a bill.
Yeah. And I want to come out of the gate and acknowledge the fact that while normally I think it's kind of disingenuous to claim that, one side or the other is just refusing to report on a topic because they're trying to bury it. I don't think the left is necessarily trying to bury Bill C-110, but I had a really, really hard time finding left-leaning publications talking about it in any great detail, which was very much a bummer.
I,
I
on the other
couldn't find
hand, had no problem finding information about it because
none
it is all over
everywhere.
the right-wing media side, which is where I spend a lot of my time. Even Joe Rogan got in on the bash
Yeah.
in Canada.
Yeah.
It won't be long before you hear about it from Bill Maher too.
Oh, probably. Yeah. He's really riding that topic into the dirt.
So why don't
So-
you give us a rundown, Will, of what you heard is Bill C-10?
So, in essence, Bill C-10 had a portion of it in place where it allowed the Canadian federal government to remove or redact information that it deemed hateful or inappropriate for audiences. And originally, Bill C-10 had a clause in place exempting, how is it described? User-generated content, I believe. So what you post on social media, YouTube, what we make in a podcast, etc., would have normally been exempt. And then at the 11th hour, they removed that clause. Hence the kerfuffle. Because now, in theory, you or I who post to Facebook or YouTube or something, if we post something that the federal government were to deem inappropriate, they could have it taken down. As far as I know, the bill doesn't give power for them to prosecute based on that or any extra power, but it gives them the power to remove it or block it or suppress it.
So
I
I
think.
listened to you, and I'm going to correct you a little bit because it
Okay,
doesn't
please
have
do.
to do with hate speech.
Okay.
It has to do with not hate speech as much as what it has to do more with is content.
Mm-hmm.
So in Canada, so all broadcasting is ruled by the CRTC, which
Yes.
is the Canadian Radio and something. Their government.
I think it's the
arm which
Canadian Radio and
controls-
Television Commission,
There you go.
I believe.
You know what
I
it
think.
is. And what they have done in the past, this has been a law in Canada for years, and it's been enacted strangely over the years, was if you're on the radio or TV, you had to have X amount of content, had to be, let me get on the screen, Canadian. How that was measured has been an interesting metric. As Bryan Adams, who is a Canadian who recorded his album in Vancouver, had one of his albums deemed as not Canadian enough by the CRTC, etc. And there are numerous examples of how the CRTC has said, yeah, no, it's not Canadian enough. So what they have added in the new version of this law is that YouTube and Facebook and other major media, whatever you call them, will have to do that as well.
Right.
And what they added is the users are now added in that mix.
Well,
So up
it wasn't so
until a
much they
month
were
ago, it was only
added as
YouTube
much
and
as they were no
Facebook.
longer excluded.
Right. So as we are based in the US, it won't really affect us for our
Right.
content as much as it might not be seen as much in Canada, as it may have to be blocked.
Right.
If having a Canadian on one side of the screen, an American on my side of the screen, might not be Canadian enough for the CRTC. And this is the major thrust of it, is they are going onto YouTube and to Facebook, and they basically are putting them on notice and saying, you need X amount of Canadian content.
Well, I'd like to preface it. They can do that.
They
haven't
can
done
do
it.
that.
They haven't done it. in a similar sense to how the EU with their bill they passed last year or the year before, where they could hold content providers liable for the content posted by their user bases. They have not enacted that yet and followed through with it. Which is where I kind of sit in a weird position with this whole thing, because on one hand, I firmly dislike the underhanded nature with which it was done at the 11th hour, and very little hubbub has been had about it, very little discussion about it. They just kind of tried to sneak it in there at the last second, and it did not go over well. At the same time, I don't like that the wording of it is so open-ended. It leaves a lot of legal gray area for where the CRTC could say yay or nay to things kind of arbitrarily without very much direction or guideline on what they can and can't deem acceptable and unacceptable. I feel like that's something that they need to be a much bigger clause on, as opposed to just
that the fact that they have given themselves, the government, the authority to do that doesn't worry you at all?
Sort of.
As governments have never been known to overuse or abuse their powers.
Most first world countries in that sense haven't. Let me clarify, in terms of large scale social media posting or large scale user generated media posting. Again, I defer to the EU as an example where they have given themselves the power, but have quickly realized that it is mathematically impossible to properly enforce it due to the sheer size of the content.
Worried about the social media power because it really is so new. But history shows us that if a government has power, it will abuse that power over time.
Maybe.
History has shown that. You just have to look at the U.S. and the spying it did on people after 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
That is definitely a first world country.
Again,
that is an abuse of power.
This is why I say sort of. Because the potential for an abuse of power exists. And it's a potential that I don't like. I don't think the potential needs to be there. I think it would have been much easier to either leave the clause in there or to create a new clause that, while user-generated content may not be completely exempt, there needs to be rules and regulations in place for what is and is not acceptable, so that we know going into it. Leaving it open-ended and blank like that is not acceptable, because it's a space where the government can put whatever rules they want in place, whatever rules would win in a court, and I don't like that.
We're going to get
on
back
the flip
into
side
this at the end of the show, but I think this is a key difference, is when we look at the rights and the powers of government to do things, when we look at the authority that they give themselves, if they use it immediately or not, there should be a piece of every individual on the planet who looks at the federal government of any country with a little bit of trepidation.
Yeah.
And said, you need to stay back.
Yeah.
And when they take power, if they use it or not is not really the issue. It's the fact they give themselves the legal right to do it. I think that should worry the average everyday Canadian and American.
Trepidation, yes. 100%. But having the ability to do something is not the same as doing something.
No, it's
so
absolutely
I'm
not.
definitely trepidatious. Like, I'm definitely concerned. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh no, this is fine. The room's on fire. I'm not sitting in the middle of a cup of coffee being like, this is fine. It's not fine, but it's not as awful as I think.
Okay, I like your
some
analogy
people are
because those of us on the other end of the spectrum are saying you're a frog in a pot of water. That it's fine now. It feels great.
But I'm not a frog in a pot of water.
But the rule allows them to do what they want.
Sort of.
Yes.
The other side of it being open-ended is that just as much as it is easy for them to interpret it one way, it'd be just as easy to fight it in court the other way. And then it ends up in court.
Yeah, but
which it can.
judges in Canada are appointed by the federal government. So don't give me that argument in Canada. That's not a good argument.
I'm just saying that it is not an absolute. Their ability to use that power, while I don't like the fact that they gave them that, and I do not like the way in which they did it, does not mean that they are planning to abuse it or going to abuse it. Especially now that it's under scrutiny like it is.
I can give you that, but it doesn't mean that 8 years along that they don't say, hey, we don't like what this guy wrote on social media.
See, but this is the
guess
thing.
What we can do, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, there is, though, because there's no way that the government could do that and get away with it anymore.
Why not?
50 years ago, because people will find out.
They're giving them the right to do it legally, Will. That's the problem.
I'm saying that they may do it. Like let's say that 5 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
the government goes ahead and does something like that. Like they find some, I don't know, some big media personality or something, and they deem that what they're saying is unacceptable, and they just wipe them off the internet, right?
Well,
or let's say it's more insidious. Let's say they start limiting the reach of their posts drastically, so it doesn't get out. It will get noticed. It will get noticed quickly. The internet will jump on it. If the government is abusing its power to such a degree like that, like you use the example of after 9/11, how the United States abused its power to spy on its own populace. Even 20 years ago, when that happened, the ability for the general public to know that stuff was happening was so much different than what it is now.
Yes.
Now the general public's ability to ascertain that it is being spied on and to call out the government is so much greater.
What good has it done them? Because they're still doing it today. It hasn't stopped.
Yes.
So they're still spying on us. It has not stopped.
I mean, they're still spying on us legally. I mean, they were spying on us before 1911 too.
Yeah, so now they changed the rules. Say, oh yeah, we can. This is the point, is all you guys are doing in Canada is you're making it easier for the government to do what it shouldn't do, but they hold the power, so now they can do it legally. Exactly what the U.S. did after the fact. They said, it's like, oh, shoot, we shouldn't do that? Ooh, I have a judge here who owes me something.
I want to kind of segue off of this topic into our next topic, which is related, by dropping kind of a little breadcrumb for next week's episode, because it's related to this. Is the Canadian government already has, to a certain degree, powers to punish what the Canadian government deems as hate speech, which I remember quite a few years ago was a pretty big issue in Canada. Like, how is the government going to abuse this? How are they going to overreach? What are they going to call hate speech now? They could call anything hate speech. And the reality of the matter is that the Canadian government hasn't really abused that power at all. They've used it very few times. And we're going to get into this next week in an incident where I think that it was used appropriately and you do not. But
we may get into it today. I may not hang up. I might keep you on the air for 2 hours.
I'm not going to engage. But the Canadian government, at least in regards of using power like this, power over the propagation of information or over free speech, they haven't got a track record of abusing it. They've got a track record of using that power for what I deem justifiable goals, what you might not deem, but the fact that they're not abusing it willy-nilly, they're not abusing it en masse. So far, their track record is good.
So let's move on to the next one, because I think at the end of it, we'll be circling around again.
Yeah.
So the other half of our conversation this week was, I said to Will, I said, have you heard about the crazy pastor in Calgary?
Artur Pawlowski.
And you said, no, I hadn't. So I got to send you a video of a screaming pastor. And so
you get to watch us react to it.
Was I got a couple of clips, and one I have is of him, and you'll get that one obviously. But before that, I got a video of the pastor in Edmonton or
Stony Plain.
Right, Stony Plain, who was arrested and locked out of his church, and
he was in prison for 30 days ish. He was in prison for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is his reaction, and then you're going to see Artur Pawlowski's reaction.
Well, good morning, Grace Life. So good to see all of you. They can take our facility, but we'll just find another one.
I'm going to pause it here, Will. As I listened to hours of his sermons after the church was closed, that was the only thing that I heard in his sermons regarding the takeover of his.
What a blessing it is for us to gather together to worship our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. How great thou art! How great thou
Man, that sounds like a bunch of troublesome Canadians right there, Will.
Oh yeah, real lawbreakers.
Oh man, those are crazy people.
2 Thessalonians 2.
Gonna sing a
16
hymn. It's
and
not even a
17
rock
say
and roll
this.
church with lasers and smoke and whatnot.
Now may our Lord Jesus Christ himself and God our Father, who has loved us and given us eternal comfort and good hope by grace, comfort and strengthen your hearts in every good work and deed.
Please get out.
And now we segue.
Get out of this property. Immediately get out.
You want to pause it for half a second?
Get out
Before
of
we,
this.
before we get into Artur Parlowski, I just want to point out that while I may have various disagreements with how the whole Grace Life Church incident went down and their pastors and the congregation, actually, less the pastor, but the congregation, their reaction to it and everything, he handled it with class. He, in general, has handled the whole situation in class. How he's talked about it publicly, how he talked about it to his congregation. He handled it with class. That
I'm going to come back
regardless
to that after the video because it is
regardless of what regardless of how I feel about his decisions that he made as a leader, he exemplified quality leadership, even if I disagreed with the minutia of his leadership.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Property immediately out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word.
So I'm going to pause this again for just a minute, Will. I do want to admit that on both of these I edited out. Hopefully I kept the spirit of the clips. I didn't edit out anything to make it say something. I just like the look on her face right there. That's why I had to stop it. But I did edit out for sake of time. I didn't want to have all 18 minutes of this nonsense. So
Out of this property immediately until you come back with a warrant. Out.
Oh, you look so pained, Will.
Out of this property. Immediately out. Immediately go out and don't come back. I don't want to talk to you. Not a word. Out of this property. Immediately out. I don't care what you have to say. Out of this property, you Nazis. Out.
The look on that officer's face on the left, Will.
Immediately, Gestapo.
He's not getting paid enough for this.
Allowed.
He's not getting paid enough. That is true.
Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out. You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Gestapo is not welcome here. Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths.
So I'm going to pause.
Choice word, psychopath.
They are. So this was April the 4th or 3rd. It was right before their Saturday
Sunday
service.
This was around 8 a.m. Sunday service started
Right.
at
So
9:30
they came back a week
a.m.
later or 2 weeks later, Will? Was this 2 weeks we figured?
2 weeks later. So on the 23rd of April, they acquired, I don't know if it's called a warrant or documentation from the government allowing them to access the premises with or without his permission. And if he resisted, they were allowed to arrest him.
In our church again.
I'm not a SWAT team, doofus.
So I'm going to go out and see what they want.
Yes. Hello, Walter.
Hi, Arthur. I was here
I'm not interested in talking. You see, this is what the Gestapo is doing. You coming to the place of worship to intimidate and to harass. So you can make an appointment. Lady, listen to me. You can make an appointment another day. You Gestapo. Another day. Not this day. Not this day. Not during the church. You understand? Make an appointment. Okay. So go.
See you later on. Have a good day.
You are sick. That's what you are. And rightfully so, you change your uniforms to black because you're exactly acting like the Gestapo of old.
This might be the most nationalist thing I will ever say, right?
Yes.
So Walter Pawlowski became a Canadian citizen in, I can't remember what year, 2004. He became a Canadian citizen. He did not apologize for yelling at somebody. He should have his citizenship revoked post haste. There was zero apology in either of those. There was no apologizing. None. Not a single sorry.
So I want to say something before we continue with this, as I know you have some choice words for Artur. That the difference in between the two, in between Artur and James, is the difference in between a Canadian who was born and raised. I can almost promise you that James Coates was born and raised in the prairies outside of Stony Plain, and Artur, who came in from Poland, did we say?
Poland.
And Greece. It's a complete temperament difference. As I am sure that James was every bit as angry as Artur was, but how he responded was completely different.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll pretty much give you that one.
Like he's every bit as mad. His church is shut down. He's not allowed in his building.
Yeah.
He just said, oh, well, we'll go somewhere else. And he did. They're still holding services to this day in undisclosed locations. I'm sure they're moving around. And Artur is going to go to jail. There's a warrant out for his arrest. I think
there is a warrant out for his arrest that they haven't acted on. And that warrant that they served him there, or that documentation they served him in the second video, that gave them every right to forcibly move him to access the building or to arrest him as they saw fit, which they did not. I think before we get into critiquing Artur, we should just give a big thumbs up to our boys in blue there. They handled that situation with class.
So the last line of the policeman, see you, Artur, who is walking away. I wish I could have cranked the audio on that part, but I didn't have time. Just the classic ending by a Canadian. Yeah, you know what? You're a jerk, but have a nice day, Artur.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, Will, and again, this is where I come back to on this, is not the difference of response. As it's an extreme difference of response. As one was put in jail, his building was taken away, was locked up, and he said, you know what, I'm going to hold church elsewhere. And the other one is screaming and calling them names. Odds are he's going to end up in jail.
Yeah, if it keeps up with this.
They are arguing for their rights in two completely different manners. But this is not the case of people who are robbing stores, who are going up and down the street and blowing up buildings, or are throwing Molotov cocktails at cop cars. These are people who are going to church.
Yes.
So from those of us on the other side of these issues, we see this heavy-handed approach. Now, I'm going to give the cops in Calgary all credit. I would have arrested the guy, and I agree with him, but I would have arrested him for being a jerk.
He's an 11 on the punchability scale. I would have clocked him.
Is he higher than Tucker, Will?
At that moment, if he was yelling at, if I was a person with the power, I had government backing to use all force I deemed necessary and someone was yelling at me like that, like a petulant child throwing a tantrum, I would have either arrested him or just straight up tased him. Just like, sit down.
Yeah.
Like, I
Listen
do
to the
not have
nice
the
lady.
self-control that those cops have. Not even a
Sit
little
down
bit.
and listen to the nice lady.
Yeah, exactly.
But what they're arguing for, Will. So I told you, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago when we talked a little bit about this, is when you look at the people on the right who slowly, and a few of them not so quietly, are saying enough is enough.
There are places where I think that is a valid conversation to have. The enough is enough. In this day and age, with
You're living in one in Peterborough in Ontario.
Yes, but in the specific instance of gatherings like that, like there are things that I think are valid points of discussion, like why we can go shopping for some things and not other things. Why big brand stores are fine to stay open, but smaller stores have a harder time staying open because they can't afford the rules and regulations put in place by the government. Those are very valid points that I think are worth contesting and changing / discussing at least. Gathering at a church, maskless, in like, there are ways around that do not infringe on the church's ability to propagate its message, to share the sermon, and to foster community, whether that be meeting outdoors, whether that be meeting with social distancing and masks. Like, obviously right now during the current lockdowns, I don't know if that works, but during certain periods over the last year, there have been times where they could have just as easily met, kept spacing, kept masks on, and they would have been perfectly fine. I don't understand the indignation on how you gather. Like, this is something that it's always bugged me, because when I was growing up, I remember so many sermons about how the church and the house of God is not a building. It's not the place where we meet. It's coming together as a community. But all of a sudden, when you're not allowed to meet in your house and collect tithes, now it's a big problem. Now it's a big deal. We've got to meet in that house. We've got to all be there. And if we wear masks, that just suddenly makes it harder to taste God's presence or something. I don't understand that being the hill they want to die on. There are hills to die on with this whole pandemic, but I think that is a terrible one.
I think the hill that they don't want to die on, Will, and in all honesty, it gets back to that original one. It's the right of the government to walk up and say, no, we're taking your building. It's the right of the government to walk up and say, no, you can't meet anymore.
And this is where the Stony Plain incident was more of a gray area, because I firmly believe that they overstepped their boundaries too quickly. Now, the pastor was going not out of his way to advertise it, but to say that he wasn't going to follow protocol. And I think they came down a little hard and fast. In Pawlowski's case, with the first incident, we've confirmed that they came in before service, and they didn't even come in to shut him down. And their second documentation for the second visit was not to shut the church down, was not with the intent to rescue him. It was with the intent to enter and inspect the premises. That was the extent of their reason for being there, was to enter and inspect.
You have to admit, you and I and every other Canadian and American knows why they want to inspect it. So is the point here, Will, is we've given the government.
If they came to take the building, that would be one thing, but they came to inspect the building.
Yes,
but because he's fucking breaking the law.
Okay, there went the Google rating.
What?
You dropped the F-bomb. Yes, I heard it. You didn't hear it.
I'm sorry. I don't remember saying it, but
Our
okay.
2 listeners heard it.
Whoops.
It's not that they were coming to inspect. We know they were coming to inspect. We know why they were coming to inspect. He was holding meetings in church.
Yeah.
Against their orders.
They were going through the due process of, they were going to inspect it. I assume then they were going to issue a citation or a fine documenting why he should not and cannot be doing that. And if he continued to resist it, then they would escalate.
Yes.
Stony Plain was going about it the wrong way, where they saw he was doing it and they just immediately escalated it and
no, they didn't
took the max.
He had a number of fines as well. It was not immediate.
Okay, well then I feel less sorry for him.
Don't feel sorry for either one of them.
Well, I don't feel sorry for Pawlowski.
But the point is, again, Will, it's not It's the reason that they're mad.
My reason
They're
to
mad
not
is the
care,
government is walking up and saying, you can't meet. It isn't if they want to meet or don't want to meet. It's the fact that somebody's walking up and said you can't.
their meeting is putting other people's lives at risk outside of that congregation, is potentially risking other people's lives. So I think it is perfectly valid for the government to step in and say, A, hey, what are you doing? And then, hey, stop doing this. And then if you still refuse, to stop you from doing that, because what they are doing is risking lives.
So I'm going to rant for a minute. So I want you to hop on Google. I'm going to kick you off this. Well, I'm not going to kick you off the screen. I'm going to take over the screen. I want you to look on Google, and I want you to look in BC and Alberta for how many cases of COVID were caused from church meetings.
There's no way to know for sure.
Oh, yes, there is. They're tracked, Will. Because in Canada, they track these things. I'm going to let you look because it's in BC, it was like 111. 0 deaths and 111 individual
That's 111 cases that you can guaranteed track back.
Were tracked to churches.
As a guaranteed tracking point.
Yeah, well,
but it's
if you're going to trust the government to shut a church down, you have to trust their ability to track data. So don't pick and choose what you like about the government. If you're going to say you're really good at keeping us safe, then you're really good at.
I don't know about
the issues
Canada, but I found North Carolina has over 200 tested positive within a single county. 12 have died.
Okay.
316 confirmed cases in Massachusetts, directly linked to places of worship. And this is as of, what's the date on this? This is in December of 2020 that we're talking these numbers. So we're talking hundreds.
So 8 months.
And we're talking hundreds. We're talking hundreds, months ago.
In a province.
And those are ones that can be directly linked.
In a state which has about 3 times the population, or more than 3 times the population of Alberta and BC combined.
It doesn't matter. If it was 10 lives that we can directly link back to people gathering at churches, why would we not take those lives seriously? I see no reason to just be like, oh, it's only X number.
Okay.
We can go meet super close with people when you can do it other ways, whether online.
So before we get to that, I want to add a qualifier before we get into this aspect of the argument, because we believe in COVID.
Yeah.
It does exist. It's not an issue. Is it real? It is not a hoax. And I want to make sure that everybody is aware that anybody in his rational mind, and I use that word carefully, will acknowledge that there is a disease and it's called COVID-19. It's its nickname. I don't think that's its actual name, but we have a friend of the family who is actually on a ventilator or coming off a ventilator.
Currently on it as of
right
today.
now from COVID-19.
And he's only, what, 30?
Yeah. So this is
he's not some old person.
So this is not an argument about is COVID real or not, because I think everybody acknowledges that it is, who has a rational head on their shoulders. How we respond to it is where we have a difference.
And it boils down to, I think that there are many aspects of how the government has handled COVID that are ranging anywhere from negligible to downright asinine, like to downright problematic, from negligible to problematic, that are worth fighting and talking about and debating. But being obstinate in instances like this, like they're not making a statement apart from resistance. That's the only statement they're making, is one of resistance. Be involved in discourse. have safe rallies or protests or things like this that actually foster a discussion and debate and a potential change. Sitting there and digging their heels into the ground and just ignoring regulation is not helping anything. It is potentially, even if you don't think that it's making it worse, it is not making it better. I think it's making it worse. If based on the number of cases, maybe it's not actually making it all that much worse, but it is definitely not helping. It's
So
not.
is
Like
that
there's
our
no
baseline
benefit
now for government intervention? Is
I
that
don't
our
think it should
baseline?
be the
If it makes
baseline.
our life easier, if it
It's
saves
not a matter
a
of
life,
making it easier.
if it saves 100 lives, if it saves 1,000 lives, it's okay for the government to remove our rights.
If these people were smarter about how they were standing up to the government's plans, we wouldn't need to be doing this.
I don't think you look at Coates and say he's being a jerk. He's
I look at
taking a
Coates and
stand,
think he's
and you
being
don't
stupid.
agree with his stance. But I'm
I
going
think
to
that he
ask
could
my
make his
question
stance
again.
differently. He doesn't need to be having services without masks and without social distancing to make
But
a
I
stand.
go back to my point, Will. If our baseline for government intervention in our lives
Is putting other people's lives at risk? Yes. It's okay.
is putting
Go for
other
it.
people's lives at risk, it's okay.
Put him in jail. If
So-
he's putting other people's lives at risk for nothing but to make a statement that does nothing, yes, put his ass in jail.
You really think that?
If he's going to
So
blatantly
continue down that
refuse-
road a little ways. Well, again, ignore
No,
COVID.
I don't have to continue down that road because he's in jail. I don't have
No,
to go any further.
No, ignore him right now, as you don't like what he does. But ignore him and look at that logically from saying if the government can save a life through regulation, if it can save 1,000 lives through regulation, I want to give them that authority. If they can save 100,000 lives through regulation, I want to hand that to them because obviously everybody needs to do that.
If people are actively putting other people's lives in danger,
Yes.
what I consider to be in danger,
Yes.
I think that it is not only the government's, I don't think that they should not only have the ability, but the government has some level of obligation to step in for the good of the citizens, to do something about it. And it's not like they just did it. He was given warning. He was given fines, apparently. All these things to try and tell him, hey, what you're doing is not okay. Hey, what you're doing is putting lives at risk. And he refused to comply. So yes, I don't think the government needs to take it further because there's not anything he can do. And if somebody else comes along and does it, I think they should be treated relatively equivalently. If people want to change the way the government is doing things around COVID, let's try and do that. But just digging your heels in does not change it. It
But they
only
dug their
makes it
heels
worse.
in after 9 months or after a year, basically, is when this all
Yeah.
hit the fan. Of huge overreach on the part of the government,
Yeah.
of moving the goalposts,
Yep.
of saying it's 2 weeks, no, it's 2 months, no, it's 6
Absolutely.
months, no, it's 9 months.
Absolutely.
So
And
we
the
look
government
at a
botched
government
it all across the board.
which
They
has
botched
not
so many
earned our
things.
trust.
I'm not
Hasn't
asking
earned
for
our
their trust.
And you're saying, but that's okay because
I'm
it's
not
the government.
saying that. I'm not
Okay.
saying that what the government did is okay in
Okay,
sense of
then
how they
what-
handled COVID. What they did to him is okay.
But what I'm
Because-
saying to you is that he and others, and I count a lot of churches in this MISC, are looking at the federal government and saying, wait a minute here. You have not handled this well from the beginning.
Okay.
Why should we trust you?
I'm not asking them to trust the
Yes,
government.
you are,
Trust
because-
trust medical professionals. Trust doctors. What is he gaining? What is he gaining from holding his services without proper protection? What does he gain? What point does he prove?
I think, Will, that you could make an argument, and we had Andick out on this show a number of months ago, and there is a huge mental health issue, and there are pastors who believe this, and I believe it, that there is a role in society for the church.
That's fine. Do
in
it.
that environment.
Do it safely. Do it with some level of social distancing. Do it online. Do it with masks. There is no way that you can convince me that doing it without masks, without social distancing, and just blatantly ignoring all the advice of medical professionals is going to gain anything towards changing how Canada's handled COVID or towards improving our situation. It does no good whatsoever. It is a net loss.
The difference is, Will, is there are lots of people, there are lots of medical professionals who say you should not eat a McDonald's hamburger. You shouldn't. It will kill you. There are more people who die of obesity in the U.S.
But my eating a hamburger is my choice, my problem, my body. He's putting other people's lives at risk.
You can make that argument for closing McDonald's down.
No, because it's my choice to buy it.
It's people's choice to show up at a church.
Yes, but if someone goes to that church with COVID and gives it to another person with COVID, and they leave that church and they give COVID to somebody else, that person had no choice. They had no say in their getting sick and possibly dying. None. Zero zilch.
So what you're saying is that if an individual ends up at church and they infect another person, and they go home and they infect another person, and they infect a person who dies, it's the church's fault.
No. It's not the church's fault.
Whose fault is it?
But the church...
It's the person who showed up at church knowing that it's possible. Is that not true?
That person had a call, but the person who got sick from them going did not have a call. That's why you have somebody who's looking at the whole situation from above and saying, hey, let's not do this, because it increases the risk.
Hold on a second. There's a lady who came who was sick. You could lay the blame on her, except maybe she didn't know. But everyone who chose to go there knows the risk. They know that it's a closed environment. They know that people aren't there with masks, so they run the risk.
If obesity was contagious, then shutting down McDonald's would have there would be a valid basis for maybe being like, you know what, as a nation, we probably shouldn't have McDonald's if obesity was contagious. It's not, because it starts and stops with the person who makes the call to go to McDonald's.
It starts and stops with the person who chooses to go to that church.
No, it doesn't, because it spreads. It spreads. It's an infectious disease, for Pete's sake.
But if nobody went to the church, it wouldn't be an issue, right?
Well, in that particular case, yes. You're negating a method for the spread. If they met with proper safety protocols in place, like every foot of distance, every extra mask worn is less chance for spreading COVID.
Okay,
or
give me a
every
second.
Zoom call.
Don't get me going on Zoom, because our president had a Zoom meeting and felt he needed to wear a mask on a Zoom meeting with world leaders. He had to make a point.
I mean, I've gone through drive-thrus with my mask on, not because I feel like I need it, but because I forgot that I had it on, because at this point it's just second nature.
So, Will?
Yes.
How many people died of COVID?
I don't know.
Give me
exactly.
a rough guess. Rough guess.
I don't,
you keep
in
up
Canada or in general?
In general.
Many millions.
Number. What's that?
Millions.
How many million?
I think in the state. Well, actually, I say that. I'm not sure about the deaths. Let's say deaths worldwide. These numbers are going to be rough because we don't know how it's like in China and etc. Total deaths currently worldwide estimated at 3.19 million.
Yep.
That is from, Wikipedia, which is getting that from what?
Well, I'm actually looking at CDC, and you're right.
Yeah, they're getting it from CDC, I think.
How many people died of obesity last year?
Probably a lot more than that.
No.
Or obesity-related causes, I would imagine, a lot.
As a result of being overweight or obese, and this is from the World Health Organization. So there are some who will argue the validity of that, although we have to pick our facts.
Yeah.
So from obesity, it's 2.8 million.
Yeah.
In 1 year.
Mhm.
Wholly preventable.
Yeah.
Absolutely preventable.
Yeah.
So it isn't contagious,
No.
but it's absolutely preventable.
Yeah.
So we could make a rule and say, you know what? We don't want you to die. And what more, I'm going to go in a little further than that, is because you could go, we're going to make a law that if you are a mom and dad, you're not allowed to take your kids there, as is not healthy.
Yeah.
But we don't.
Yeah, because it's not an apples to apples comparison.
If the baseline, and you said this earlier, and this is the argument for lockdowns and for all these issues, is if we save a life, if we save 100 lives, if we save 300 lives, if we save 1 million lives, it's worth it. I don't mind them arresting a pastor for holding church if one life is saved.
The pastor insists on doing stupid things that put lives at risk. Yes.
Okay, so are we going to arrest mom and dad for taking little Johnny
No.
to McDonald's because we know there is a correlation between unhealthy eating and their
Yes, we do.
food?
But
we're not gonna arrest
again,
mom and
it
dad?
is no. I mean, I'm going to look down on mom and dad for feeding little Johnny too much McDonald's, but if they're feeding him enough McDonald's to be the exclusive cause of him being obese, then that's a problem. But it's not an enforceable or
I'm using
illegal
McDonald's
problem.
as an example
But I'm just saying
of unsafe behaviors.
obesity or unsafe behavior.
Mhm.
Again, I don't know how else to reiterate this. That is a choice that affects you. Only you. It is not infectious. Obesity is not infectious. I can't sneeze on you and get you fat. But COVID is spreadable, and every extra person that spreads it, it multiplies. Every one person can infect multiple people, and they can infect multiple people, and they can infect multiple people.
Yes.
And every one of those is at risk of dying. And they had no choice in the matter. There was no personal choice for them to, maybe I should or shouldn't get COVID. I'll get COVID. It's fun. I want to be a statistic.
So
I'm
here's
going to
a
go
fact.
order a big COVID. There's none of that. They get it regardless. And I feel like we have some obligation as a society to look out for each other. And if we are incapable of doing
Okay,
that,
so
we
I
have a
agree
government
with-
that helps us do that.
With everything you just said. I agree with everything you just said. So here's a fact. I know this because it's me. I was on the phone with a friend this afternoon
Mm-hmm.
who I have seen once. I have seen once in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And he lives about 3 blocks away from me.
Yeah.
He will not enter a building. He orders his groceries online. He's a Christian. He has not attended any church services. He thinks it's not safe. So
Yeah.
he hasn't done it.
Yeah.
He hasn't met up with people because he thinks it's not safe.
Yeah.
So if I go to church, or I go to Walmart, or I go to Will's house, he's not at danger. He's not at risk.
Yeah.
Because he recognizes the risk and says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mitigate the risk. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to work from home. I'm going to order my groceries in. I'm going to order my food in. He has removed the risk.
Yeah.
No government had to do that for him.
No.
No government had to look at him and say, hey, Jim
Not
Bob,
everybody has the ability to do that. Not everybody can afford to have their groceries delivered. Not everybody can work from home. Some people have to work jobs that force them into a public setting where they are at risk.
But nobody has to go to church.
Exactly.
And Will, if you feel it's unsafe, or if you have a friend who went to church and you look at that and you say, I don't like that. It's unsafe. I don't want you to come to my house anymore.
Then you're helping to mitigate the risk, but you can't stop it because Dolores, who went to church, is probably going to go to Walmart to get her groceries, and you might have gone to the same Walmart or gotten your groceries delivered from the same Walmart. Like, it's It's unnecessary. Like you said, they don't have to go to church.
No, they don't.
I don't have to go to church, and they don't have to go to church.
No, they don't have to.
There isn't, like, I don't know how else to word it. There is a valid argument for our rights being trampled as Canadians right now. But
and Americans.
And Americans. Going to church and digging your heels in and doing it anyways does not gain anything, but it risks losing something. It is a no-win. There's a no-sum game, I think is what you call it. There's no positive outcome there. Find something to do that's positive. Use your congregation or your platform to spread ideas. I don't know if they're good ideas or not, but do it safely.
There are people who argue that it is healthy for people to meet and to go to church. You don't agree with them.
I do not, and neither do the majority of medical professionals.
I wouldn't say that.
I would.
I wouldn't say that.
I would argue the vast majority. Go ask Megan. See what she says.
I think that there is an argument for mental health.
Definitely.
For all these other things which we have ignored because of COVID, that we have said, yeah, no, we're going to...
Definitely.
We're going to do the COVID thing, and we're just going to ignore all those other health factors. We're just going to put them to the side because they really don't matter.
I don't think that they don't matter, and I think that they were mismanaged and mishandled, and I think that part of this mismanagement and mishandlement is part of why the COVID crisis is lasting as long as it is and why vaccines are taking so long to get rolled out. It was definitely mismanaged, and it has definitely gone awry, but holding church services doesn't fix a thing. It does nothing. It might make them feel a little better, but it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Here's a truth bomb. I just heard that word the other day. I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I don't know that it's...
Hopefully it's not a truth dud.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I'm saying it after all. So much of this is a perspective issue. And a lot of it, and this is where you and I, we sort of agree a little bit. And this is where neither one of us are looking at the government and saying, ooh, you've handled this really well.
Yeah, not even close.
And where we differ is I say, if they haven't handled it well, why are we giving them these powers? Why are we acknowledging their authority? If they have handled it wrong so many different ways from Sunday, and we look at it and say, yeah, but in this case, yeah, you can go for it. So that is where I think our divergence is coming, is we look at the government and we say, no, you suck. You have done some really stupid things.
They have done stupid things that have made it worse than it needed to be, but they did have to do some things. Some of what they did was necessary. How much, I don't know. But reaching a point where you're just like, screw it, I'm just going to ignore all of it, doesn't help anything. That's going right back to doing nothing, which
I think
only makes it worse.
I don't know this, so this is my guess. Had they gone to houses of worship early on and say, you know what, we realize that you serve a function in the community as equally as valuable as Walmart and Home Depot.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, Home Depot. Maybe not Walmart, because there are groceries in Walmart, but for sure, Home Depot.
Yeah.
So if you mask up and limit your numbers.
Yep.
Hold multiple services.
Yep.
Had they done that,
Do I think it would have gone differently?
You most likely would not have seen the rebellion.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't make the rebellion right.
Well, it kind of does.
No.
It kind of does.
It makes me empathize with the rebellion, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't change the fact that it's putting lives at risk. It makes me feel for them. I empathize with them.
But that would be that whole thing, Will, about the acceptable risk. If they had gone to Walmart, Home Depot, and churches,
mm-hmm.
and said, all of you are essential to society.
Yeah, absolutely.
So minimize the risk. Here's how you do it. If you
Yeah.
mask up, and again, you limit numbers.
Yeah.
Had they done that, there's a
I
whole
couldn't
different
agree more.
story.
Like, yeah, I could not agree more. I think that would have been great.
But
Phenomenal.
what happened
A+.
is they went to the church and said, no, you can't meet.
Yeah.
And the churches said, okay, we'll do that for a while. But
Yeah.
over time, they're looking around at Home Depot and Walmart
Yeah.
and the Bay and Zellers, and they're going, wait a minute here. So then they say, whoa.
Again.
We are essential, so we want to meet. So what happens is you get the rebellion, and in rebellion, you go over.
Yeah.
And you say, you know
That
what, I
doesn't
don't
mean it's
like
right.
masks either. I don't like
It
this
ends
other
up that
stuff.
way. It ends up that way, but that doesn't make it right. Just because that's what happens, just because it tips the scales too hard on a regular basis, doesn't mean that it should. It just means that it did.
I think you're asking individuals to look at a government which has mishandled this from day one and say, ooh, and this one you're okay.
I'm not asking that. I'm
You're
not asking that.
them
No, I'm
to
not.
Say, you know what?
No,
This is
I'm
unsafe,
not.
so therefore, yeah, we won't do it.
You've got the
government
first
telling you
half
it's
right.
unsafe.
The government shouldn't have to step in and enforce the unsafeness. You should be able to look at it and be like, wow, this is unsafe. We shouldn't have to have the government step in. Like, that's where all of this stems from. We shouldn't have to have government oversight to keep us from killing each other by spreading a disease. In a perfect world, we would all look at what the doctors are saying and being like, oh, hey, whoa, maybe we should all stay home and order our groceries for a little while till this blows over. Maybe we should be a little more careful with who we meet up with. Maybe we should wash our hands more often. Maybe we should social distance. Maybe we should wear our masks. Whatever the parameters.
Mm-hmm.
If we as a country could look at the situation and look at what the doctors are saying and be like, oh, wow, yeah, that makes good sense, and do it, we wouldn't need government to step in and enforce it. But too many people don't do it. Some people can't do it because they don't have the ability to go buy masks or the ability to social distance because of the jobs they're forced to work to pay for their family's food. But the majority of people have the ability, and I would love to think have the intelligence to do that, but they don't. That's why government had to step in and do something about it. And they did it wrong, and they did it ineffectively, and now they have prolonged the problem because of it. But that doesn't mean that just negging back and just pushing back even harder is going to fix anything. I sympathize for why they're doing it. But my sympathy doesn't make it good, doesn't make it acceptable. It just means I feel for them.
We have
gone over our hour limit.
I don't care about the hour limit as much as we have. We've reached about as much as an impasse as we ever have on this show.
Yeah,
we've been in it for 6 months, and this is the first one. And this is actually our 6-month episode, Will.
This is, and I think this is the first time I've shouted on my microphone. You might have to tone it down in post because I got pretty loud.
It is it's a good thing though that we have these conversations.
It is.
We need to have them in society more often where
absolutely
you don't agree with somebody, and that's okay. Now,
yeah.
Now, in this case, my disagreement apparently is killing people and Will's is saving lives. So maybe his is more okay than mine. But we need to have these conversations, and we need to have them regularly.
We just had a heated conversation with minimal swearing and no blows and no lawsuits and no weapons.
I wanted to say that you swore once, and so it was
minimal. I said minimal. Minimal.
It was minimal. But apparently the algorithms now are okay with that. And the blows are only because I'm a continent away, 3/4 of a continent away.
Even
but the
then,
no
I
weapons
think,
is true.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly that these are conversations that need to be had. They're heated, they're passionate.
Yes.
But they're not vitriolic. Neither one of us is discounting the other one out of hand. Like I say, you've given me a new perspective, and I feel a new level of sympathy for what these churches are dealing with. I still don't agree with it, but understanding is better than nothing.
So I don't think anybody in the right mind agrees with Artur Pawlowski, Pawlowski, whatever his name is. He is a
petulant child.
That was the first
and
thing
maybe
I thought,
a grifter.
But no, I don't think he's a grifter, Will. I think
he's a believer.
He's a preacher, and I think his first video that he did, I think it caught on, and he realized, wow, this connects with
This
people.
sells. Yeah.
Well, it connects with people.
This
And-
spreads.
And so the second one, I think the whole thing with not this day, not this day, I think there was a preacher at his finest.
It was a performer at his finest.
Well, yeah,
I think that some of the best preachers are really talented performance artists. Not to say they're
Absolutely.
lying. I just mean they're performance artists.
Absolutely they are.
He was
He was
producing a
performing.
performance for us.
Absolutely. And I think that, well, I agree with his stance that you don't. I think we both agree that how he did it was not nearly as effective
Very un-Canadian.
with how Coates did it.
So I stop you. I know we're almost done, but I have to. Your glasses are like all cockeyed. You look like a mad scientist.
Well, beats me doing this and looking at you.
I mean, no, but I mean like one side was higher than the other, so they were like crooked.
Well, they hook on my in-ears and then they ride up.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I don't like to mess with them, so now I'll take them off so I look like a...
We can see those beautiful eyes.
Ooh. So yeah, so that was...
This
next
was a
week,
prime
Will-
example of what we always wanted to do with the show. We finally hit that point where we were really going at it, and I'm really proud of this episode. Honestly, I'm genuinely proud of it.
So next week we're going to hit a little bit more on the free speech issue because we never got to that. A little bit
If
more on
anyone-
COVID. I have a letter from the BC nurses or from the Canadian and Nurses Association that'll
Yes,
touch on that a bit
and
too.
if anyone wants to do homework, which I know you don't, you can Google Bill Whatcott. He's part of what we're going to be talking
Ooh,
about next week.
yes.
Google him and his Supreme Court case, and you'll be ready to rumble next week.
So all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, we have 3 people watching. We've had one all night long, and it's your mother. Now we have 3 watching. Hello, whoever
You missed all the
are.
good stuff.
Say hi in the comments. And yes, you missed all the
Yeah,
fireworks.
you can go watch
But
it
I
on
really
YouTube
want to know
after we're
who
done
you are
uploading.
that's watching us right now. So say hi in the comments, please. I want to know who it is. I'm curious.
That's the beauty of live.
It's Alex. Hey, Al.
Hey,
It's good to
what's
see
that,
you,
buddy?
bud. I'd add that into the stream, but I don't want to include that in the video. Hey, Al.
Hey,
How's it going, bud? You missed us arguing about COVID. Imagine that.
it was a regular Dave and Jack Thiessen moment, but with me instead. If Jack ever sees this show,
He did watch one week. I do know that.
that's true.
He tuned in one week. So it's something, Will, that I think that I have. There's a lot of differences in between how the faith in government from those on the right hand of center is
Shot.
it's almost non-existent. And so when you ask us to say, yeah, then let them arrest them, we look at it and say, no, we don't trust the government anymore. As this huge overreach, the ignoring of data or the using of data get to its own ends or political ends, I think is it's hurting us. It's hurting us as countries. And
I sympathize that. I would ask that we find more constructive ways to go about expressing our not disillusionment, but our dissatisfaction. Because that's where I sit. That's my most like right of center viewpoint, is my lack of faith in government. But until I can find a viable alternative to them stepping in to protect us, I don't know what else to do, because we're not doing a very good job of it ourselves.
yeah, it's interesting. In the U.S., there obviously is more freedom, if you will, if that's the word I want. So there have been a number of lawsuits, and in every one, the ruling thing has ended up actually in the churches in their favor for saying you can't control us in terms of numbers of people, etc.
Yeah.
And it's
I mean, it's harder to go about suing the government in Canada, but I mean, that's a great way of doing it. Like
it isn't
they're fighting back.
lawsuits at the government. It's lawsuits against. Well, I guess it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the officials who are acting on the government's behalf, essentially.
Yes.
And that's great because then you're ending up with a legal precedent. And setting a legal precedent like that is good for the ability for churches in the future to fight back.
Yeah.
In a constructive and healthy manner.
Yeah. Well, not really. It's screaming pastors here too. So we have our share of our Pawlowskis.
I'm sure.
Whatever his name is.
I'm sure. Jim Bobs.
Jim Bobs, yes. Screaming Jim Bobs.
Screaming Jim Bobs.
Well, Will, we should sign off for the night.
Should.
You have anything you'd like to say to our fine followers?
Stay safe and don't die.